We are
Yay.
live. I love
This
it.
is awesome. This is awesome. I'm so excited.
I am so excited. This is amazing. Just want to first off say, hey, thank you so much for watching or listening, however you are consuming the content. It means the world to me. For those who don't know who I am Tiara, aka T, your wine diva. And today I am sipping on an amazing Riesling that I had last night for Wine 101 Wednesday. And I found out that it pairs perfectly with like homemade bang bang shrimp. So like if those of you who might have like a Bonefish Grill like know what I'm talking about, they're pretty amazing. And this was like awesome with it. And today I have an amazing guest, the lovely Kim, who is the owner of Final Draft Tap House in Vancouver, Washington. So for those who might not know who you are, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, and sorry about the motion, everybody. I have 2 cats that absolutely love to be wherever I am. They are beer cats. Their names are Simmy and Simcoe, I should say, and Citra. So we might be interrupted with them like I am right now. But anyway, I'm Kimberly. Online, people know me as ABV Girl, which actually stands for Adventures, Brews, and Views, or alcohol by volume. I don't know, whatever one you want to go with.
I love it. Alcohol by volume.
Yes. So, yeah. And I own a tap house. I'm into craft beer, and I'm happy to talk with you today and learn about wine, maybe a little too.
We can learn about wine. I want to definitely learn about beer. So how did you get into like owning a tap house and into the beer world?
Okay. So first of all, I've always loved craft beer. I've always loved beer. I grew up in Wisconsin, so beer was around me right from the start. But I was one of those people who always wanted a lot more flavor in her beer versus American light lagers. And so my journey really started in craft beer, though, when I moved to the Pacific Northwest 6 years ago. Okay. I was working in a corporate job and was working in marketing and PR. And after 12 years, I was just burnt out and wanted to pursue entrepreneurial endeavors, right? Ooh. So I moved to the Pacific Northwest, and this area is very well known for craft beer. And so then I was, just exploring craft beer and adventuring and finally doing things that I really love to do versus sit in my office or behind a desk all day, every day. So I started pursuing just adventuring and exploring the Pacific Northwest, and then finding an adventure, and then finding the local craft beer. And my writing journey around that started in Astoria, Oregon, where Fort George Brewery is. And so I was like, you know what? How about I just write about my experiences exploring craft beer and adventuring and my new Pacific Northwest life? And so I started that. And that really led me to working in craft beer. It actually opened the doors for me at my first brewery I worked at, which is Ex Novo Brewing. So they're in Portland, Oregon. And I started working there, and I opened a couple other breweries. And while I was writing about beer and working in beer, I met my partner, Mike, who is my business partner at Final Draft Tap House, but also my husband now. We just got married 2 months ago today. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's kind of the short version. But the main thing that I found in craft beer was, and there's Mike. He's leaving to go to the tap house. The main thing I found in craft beer, though, is my people. The community is absolutely amazing. And I really felt at home in craft beer. And so I don't want to work in any other industry. So we decided to open a tap house in Vancouver, Washington, which is right near Portland, Oregon. And, now they say the rest is history. So that's my story.
I love it. So is a tap house the same as a brewery, or like Can the words be used interchangeably, or do they mean something fundamentally different?
They do actually mean something very different. And this is one of those things. And I am going to crack a beer.
Yes.
Yay, Matchless Brewing. But I am going to put it in this wine glass, everybody. So, I thought I would bridge.
Yeah.
I thought I would bridge the two. So, what a tap house is a craft beer bar, essentially. Mm-hmm. We have 30 rotating taps. We also have cider and wine. But a tap house is really hosting and promoting other breweries' beer.
Okay.
And so oftentimes a brewery is called their tasting room is called a tap room, or a brew pub if they offer food. But a tap house is where we promote the beer of others versus making the beer. So we don't make our own beer. Okay. We do collaborate with breweries and have our beer that we brew with them on their systems at our tap house, but we don't brew beer on premise.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. So I'm saying, I love that you're using a wine glass, and I've definitely seen people, especially with craft beer, utilizing a wine glass or something that has a bigger bowl. Can you speak to, is it similar to with wine, where it kind of helps open up flavor and, getting the aromatics and all that good stuff of a craft beer?
Yes. So, in craft beer, we don't tend to drink it like this in tap rooms, tap houses, right? Right. I'm just doing it today because I love this big globe of a glass that we have when we do. See, I don't even know what they're called, but anyway, but we do have these at home, and I thought I would use it today. But it is similar with those beers that have different glassware in craft beer. So oftentimes when you go to places, there's one glass, and that's honestly. It's honestly because that's economical, right? It's not, right. There's different glassware for craft beer, but it doesn't necessarily always translate from an economical standpoint in a tap house or what have you. But it does open up, the right glass will help the beer open up as well, just like wine.
Awesome. Love it. So do you have a favorite kind of seasonal style of beer?
Oh, well, so I drink all craft beer. There are styles that I prefer over others. Mm-hmm. And right now I will talk a little bit about, so my preferred style of craft beer is India Pale Ales, IPAs. That's kind of a year-round thing for me. But right now we're rounding out the fresh hop season. Mm-hmm. And in the Pacific Northwest, there are a few other regions in the world that grow fresh hops as well, but we are certainly one of the leading producing areas in Yakima, Washington, and that's just one area near here. But so we have the blessing of having fresh hops that we can use basically, or that breweries can use straight from the vine. And they pick them and they put them either in the brewing process on the hot side, or they will do a dry hopping process on the cold side, essentially when it's fermenting. And so it makes for such an amazing, I guess the words I use are danky, from the earth, hop. A lot of times people say hoppy, but it's just that fresh. Sometimes it smells like marijuana because they are cousins. But fresh hop season right now is rounding out. And Mike and I, actually my partner, we talk about it a lot. We go and chase freshies, right? Fresh hop beers. And many people come to our place for that too. So right now it's fresh hop beers. And then we're getting into the season of Märzen's right now. So Oktoberfest as well. They kind of overlap. Mm-hmm. And every year I forget how much I love those. So Märzen's are.
Can you talk a little bit about the beer making process? Is it I feel like wine is very complex in that you can use different barrels and different stainless steel tanks and all the kind of things. Is it the same thing, or does it kind of seem like more just a balance between how much hops do you use and barley and all of that, and what goes into that process?
Hey, buddy. Yeah. So here's what I will say about the brewing process. I don't know brewing like in and out.
Mhm.
Oh, there's my little guy.
I love it.
That's Citra. He's named after the Citra hop. But so it is very complex. It can be explained in more layman's terms, of course, but it is very complex, and it's art and it's science.
Mhm.
So breweries have, it depends on how big their brewery is, of course, and what barrel system they have. But there's so much involved in it, and of course, it's the ingredients, right?
Right.
Water, the four ingredients: water, yeast, malt, and hops, right? And beer. But it's one of those things where there's so many complexities to brewing that, I think nowadays with the craft beer boom, everyone thinks they can do it, but
Right.
that's not always the case, right? So there is a lot that's involved in it. And I would assume, I don't know the winemaking process, but there's probably a lot of similarities also, like with coffee. A lot of
Mhm.
times people explain it that way as well, like with coffee.
Oh
So,
yeah. Coffee and tea, very similar,
yep.
similar thing. And so you said like different types of hops, like Citra is named after a type of hop. So there's different kinds, kind of like varietals of grapes.
Yes. Yeah, there
I
are
know.
so many hops. And the hops there's a couple things that hops do. So hops provide aromatics, they provide
Mhm.
aroma, and they also provide bittering. And
Okay.
so it depends on how they use them. I talked a little bit about how the fresh hops go into the brewing process, and they can do it two ways. They can do it in the boil, right? And they can also do it on dry hopping. So the boil tends to give it, when they put them in the boil, it tends to give it bitterness. When they dry hop it, it tends to add to the aromas of the beer. And there are so many. A lot of them are from the Pacific Northwest.
Mhm.
Many of those that have been around a long time, like Centennial and Cascade, of course, are a couple different hops that have derived from here. But now we're seeing hops come from Australia, New Zealand, lots of different areas that will allow for hops to grow.
Interesting. I love this. There was like one question, and for people who are looking to get into like craft beer. So like I know for me when I'm talking to people about wine, like they usually start off with like something sweeter, like a Riesling, Moscato, Muscat, and then they work their way up to like deeper, richer reds and stuff. So like for me, like when it comes to beer, I don't want anything hoppy. Like an IPA, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna do a stout, probably not. So for someone that's interested in like exploring craft beer and really getting into it, where do you suggest that they start?
So, hold on, I lost it. Oh, there it is. See, this is being new to live. Oh my goodness. There's a couple places that I would suggest people start. So I will try to equate it with wine a little bit. So
Mhm.
uh, knowing just this much about wine. So generally, where people would want to start is a wheat beer.
Okay.
So one of the places, and I'll talk about a few others. So a wheat beer, and if you're into Chardonnay, a wheat beer might be a nice place to start. Very similar characteristics. Another one might be a pale ale.
Mhm.
So a pale ale is one of those beers that are recommended when people first start getting into things. It's not overly hoppy. It's pretty mellow. It's very inviting. It's one of those that I think is coming back around, frankly, in beer.
Mhm.
But if you're brand new, that's a good place to start. Oftentimes, like I talked about a wheat ale, a Hefeweizen. So I don't know if you're familiar with Widmer Hefeweizen. That's an
I love a
American style
Hefeweizen.
Hefeweizen that is nice and smooth. It tends to be lower in alcohol, and it is a place for people to start. It's actually one of the places I started. So I didn't want to do American light lagers like Bud Light, Coors Light,
Mhm.
Budweiser, all of that, that, of course I tried those in the very beginning, but there wasn't much there for me. So I did go into the Hefeweizens.
Not a lot of
And
flavor.
no, not a lot of flavor. It tends to sometimes, those are like, there's a lot of adjuncts in those, or there can be, and a lot of corn, in order for it to be mass produced. So,
Mhm.
um, so wheat ales, Hefeweizens, a lot of times fruited beers as well can be a nice place for people to start. And anything that's a little bit lighter and refreshing and effervescent. Another good one is a Kolsch. So if people are wanting something that's a little bit more like an American light lager, but the Kolsch is really nice. It's a nice gateway beer as well for people. It's oftentimes what I serve to somebody at the tap house if they say, well, I'm not really a beer drinker, but I'm used to drink, or I'm not really a craft beer drinker. I'm used to drinking Bud Light or whatever. That's oftentimes where we can bring them into the foray of craft beer.
Awesome. So one of the things I like to talk and like educate people about is that sometimes like commercial grade wines can have a lot of filler and a lot of stuff in there. And so do you find the same thing in the beer industry?
Yes, completely. So when beer is mass produced, right, whether it is a corporate entity that's producing it, or one that is independent but is distributing across the country or even internationally, a lot of those things do have to be added in order for it to be mass produced, right? And
Right.
for it to travel and all of those sorts of things. So, it's always this sort of, people get into the whole, you know, beer snobby thing, and we get all into that, and we can all do that, right? But again, beer is subjective, it's not
Mhm.
objective. However, as someone who supports independent local craft beer, and it's really important to know what's in the product you're drinking, but also where it comes from and how it's produced. So we always advocate for people to just learn more about what goes into all of it,
Mhm.
and the reasons why something might have to have those in there. And then once we've educated ourselves, then we can make the determination. I mean, again, people are going to drink what they're going to drink, but
Fair
um, I would love for people to drink craft, because not only because it is, all natural, but it supports the local independent small business that, from a brewery standpoint, just like a tap house standpoint, we literally rely on that in order to pay our bills and be able to do what we do. So there's a lot of reasons to understand, craft beer, and I'm assuming wine as well, right? Isn't it
Oh, yeah.
similar? Yeah.
It's very similar. Like you said that, commercial, when you have to mass produce something to make it more cost effective, to make it be able to last longer, for shelf life, all that good stuff, you have to add different things into the winemaking process. And then
Yeah.
there's also the idea of like, are we going to try to make it so that it tastes exactly the same from year to year, or are we
Oh,
going to like try to play out with the
yes.
vintages and be a little bit more on the natural side and kind of let the wine do its thing? So it's a conversation that needs to be had. And like you said, people are going to drink what they're going to drink,
Yeah.
but having a little bit of knowledge, I think, is going to help you make a
Yeah.
better choice. Mhm.
Yeah. And I think your point about making the wine or the craft beer taste the same every single time, it's one of those things where we see it in craft beer, where we'll have a batch of, or a keg of one beer, and they'll produce it again the following year, and it doesn't taste exactly the
Exactly the
same.
same. Right.
But isn't that the joy of it, right? We do get a
Right.
lot of drinkers that just want to drink the same thing over and over and over, and that's fine. But then that's where they tend to go to some of the ones that are mass produced, right? Because they know it's going to be consistent. But what
Mhm.
I try to encourage people is understanding that educational part, why it might be different. The hops are different this year, all of that, right? And when things are grown, it's different because of the soil and because of various things. So I think it's very similar to wine in that regard.
Very true. So it just made me think of like, do people actually like age craft beer? Is like that a thing?
Yes, it's awesome. Now, I will say not all beer can be aged. So I talked about a few styles earlier. IPAs, right? Pale ales, those are not to be aged. Those are to be drank within however many months, right, of making them, of brewing them. There are beers like sour ales, wild ales, barrel-aged beers. There's a lot of beer that gets created like stouts and saisons. They get put in barrels and they're aged for 9-12 months. So one of the things that we do at the Tap House, and it's not unique to us, but we love doing it. So we celebrate our anniversary in July because we opened in July. So what we do is we do a Christmas in July, and we cellar. Well, Mike cellared 15 beers and had them on this past July. And he's going to keep doing more and more and more because they age. So we didn't go through all of those beers this last July. So we're going to continue to cellar them and bring them out either throughout the year or in July again. So the key to aging beer is knowing which ones will age, right? And which ones won't.
Right.
And it's so amazing though, because they get better and better when they stay in the cellar longer and the bottle longer.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's amazing. It's the same thing with wine because like you can't age every single wine. Usually you would focus more on something that's already got some body and some richness to it. And then as it ages, more like tertiary flavors kind of start to expose themselves, and some of like the tannin and the harshness starts to kind of dissolve, and just it takes on a whole nother like flavor profile, which is so just amazing.
Yeah.
It's so
I have a question. So in wine, do you do verticals? Is it called the same thing, verticals?
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, so like different vintages.
Yes. So we do, I know, I don't know why I don't know that, but we do that same thing. So what we'll do is we'll collect, for instance, Ex Nova Brewing, where I used to work, they do an anniversary beer every year. And they've been open 5 years now. So we collected every beer of their anniversary beer, and it ages. So we just recently did a vertical, actually with our staff as a thank you around the anniversary time. We did 1 through 5 and cracked them all. And then we basically sat and talked through what's the difference and how do they taste? Because they weren't all the exact same beer, but they were, but one was 5 years old, right? So it's like, it was awesome.
That's so much fun.
I
love that. It's such a good conversation, and it really kind of shows the magic that is in the making process and the aging process, and what beer and wine can really do. And it's amazing. So one question for you about, like, I feel like a lot of people talk about, I don't drink beer because it like makes me gain weight or whatever. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I think you did a story the other day, and I was like, yes, I love it. Tell me more.
Yeah. That was my challenge. That was one of my challenges that I did for that's how we met on the Instagram challenge.
Yes.
So, so a lot of, I hear two things, and oftentimes I hear them from women. Let's just say that. Now, I don't always hear it from women. I do hear it from men too, but there's two things I hear. One is, I don't drink beer because it makes me feel bloated. Okay, that's valid. It's like, but what I will say about that is, if you're not used to having whatever it is, right? That's how you're going to feel. So for instance, you don't eat a lot of vegetables, you start eating vegetables, that's how you're going to feel. You don't eat a lot of whatever it is, that's how you're going to feel. It's the same thing with beer. However, if you drink more of it, you won't feel that over time. I never feel bloated when I drink beer because I drink beer often. it actually, the carbonation settles my stomach if I ever am anxious or whatever it is, right? So I just talk a little bit about that with people, and I'm not encouraging people to, go and drink a bunch of beer in order to not feel that.
Right.
But it's not really a valid statement per se, right? Around beer. It's just around anything new in your body. The other one that I hear is, it's got so many calories, I'm going to gain weight. Uh, or I'm going to get a beer belly or whatever it may be. The thing is with that is, of course, it has calories. Most things have calories. I believe beer has natural calories versus, processed things or super high processed sugars like sodas or whatever it may be. So yes, it does have calories. However, I tend to think it's all the other stuff that we put in our bodies after we've had a few that really is the one that gives us, weight gain or, whatever it is, beer bellies. I don't know if, I don't even know that beer bellies are even a thing, right? I just think it's a belly. But anyway, so it's just one of those things where, we have to, if we're into wine, if we're into beer, if we're into whatever it is that we put into our bodies that has calories, we also need to be mindful of the other aspects, right? Where we have to move our bodies. We have to watch what else we put into it because we want to enjoy a couple beers and they may have, 200 calories or whatever, 210 calories in them, at the end of a long work day. So, those are a couple things that we hear, but I just kindly help educate people about my beliefs around it. So
yes, being mindful of what you're putting in your body, that makes total sense. And like you said, if you're introducing something new, it doesn't matter what it is, it's going to take some time to for your body to get acclimated to that new thing. Right. So that bloating sensation is totally normal.
Right.
So we're going to completely switch gears. And one of the things I'm really interested in hearing about is what's it like working in what seems to be a very male dominated industry?
Well, it's so interesting. I actually get asked this a lot. And here there's 2 points I'll make with that. The first is, and I'll bring it back to what I said earlier, about finding my home in craft beer. Mm-hmm. I have never met some of the most supportive, incredible human beings in the industry and surrounding the industry, and that's men and women. Craft beer really just has this incredible collaborative community where everyone is accepted and appreciated and respected. That's my experience. But I also am one of those people, I think, that tries to role model what I believe the values should be regardless of gender, right? And so I tend to be a leader in my community, and I try to role model what I want females to embody in this industry. Now, with that said, the only time I've ever had any sort of issues with being a female in the industry is generally when it comes to male customers. And that, the ones that might not be those that have the value system of the craft beer community. So I experienced that in breweries. I've experienced that in bars before I even worked in craft beer. I actually do experience it a little bit at our tap house too, even though I'm behind the bar and the owner. They don't know that all the time. Right. And so I have to field comments that are kind of like, one in particular I'll bring up, which I think this is interesting. They're like, oh, so your husband owns this bar, right? And I'm like, well, yes, Mike and I do own this bar, or whatever. It's just like, only guys can own these things. What the hell, So, and that is, it's actually not even, it's kind of an innocent thing. Right. But it's kind of like, interesting. So I just work here and my husband owns it, so you're like, oh, whatever. Right. But then of course there's other things, about, the way I dress or look or, or the other part of it too is like, the reality of getting mansplained to about beer is true.
Yep. I get it all the time with wine.
Yeah. Because God forbid I would know anything about craft beer, right?
Right. Oh gosh, no way.
So a lot of it is also, it's all education, right? I just tend to be one of those that can say, I'll just in a kind way make a statement about, oh, Mike and I do own this bar together. Yeah. Or whatever, right? It's just how you frame it up to help them understand and just kind of, so it's twofold. It's always twofold. And I think one of the things is just being that person who, I guess, demands respect, right?
Right.
That's what I try to do. And I try to role model it too for others, or help other women who might have dealt with things that are, hard to deal with sometimes. But guess what? We can do it. We rock it. We rock everything we do, right?
We can do anything. And I love it.
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly.
So for anyone that wants to find you, try out the tap room or find you on social media, where should they look?
Okay, so I'm on all the social medias. So Facebook is Adventures Brews Views. On my personal beer side of things, Instagram, it's ABV Girl. Twitter, it's ABV Girl. For my tap house, it's Final Draft Tap House on Facebook. It's FD Tap House on Twitter or Final Draft Tap House on Instagram. So we're definitely on all the social media. Otherwise, it's adventuresbrewsviews.com or finaldrafttaphouse.com.
Awesome. I love it. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience today?
So I would just like to say thanks for tuning in, everybody, because this is my first live. It's literally the first time we've had a conversation together, which is awesome. And I would love to connect with anybody who wants to ask me questions about beer, how to get into beer, anything beer related, or how to work in beer as well, because that's one of the things that I see that a lot of the people who are on are women. There's not enough women in craft beer.
Oh yeah.
And there should be more. And I would love to help anybody get into craft beer. So, hit me up. I'm happy to have a conversation.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today. And then thank you for whomever is watching, listening, all that good stuff. It really means the world to me that you're tuning in and showing some love. If you got some value out of this video, out of this podcast, please share it out, send it to your friends, family, and thanks again. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Bye.